If you have ever reached for a radio just to fill the silence, you know the sound I mean. The gentle hiss underneath a voice, the way someone far away can feel like they are speaking from a chair across your kitchen table. My little bungalow sits a few blocks from the bay in Maple Harbor, Oregon, an old timber town that shrank down and learned to live with its gulls and gray skies. I keep a small radio on the counter next to the flour canister. It has a dent on one side from the time I knocked it with an elbow while kneading dough. That radio has outlived 2 microwaves, 3 toasters, and my husband Daniel. I'm 65, a retired librarian, and as I tell people when they apologize for talking too much at the circulation desk, words never scared me. The quiet does. That morning, it rained the kind of rain our town specializes in. Fine and patient, more mist than downpour. The bay smelled like salt and kelp. I made oatmeal heavy with nutmeg and brown sugar, set out half a banana, and washed the single bowl and spoon when I was finished. I left the radio tuned to the mid-morning block, preachers and farm reports on AM, an oldies hour on FM. Then the announcer said they were switching to a local program, Open Sky, and a woman's voice slid into the room as if it had always lived there, the kind of voice that can hold a story like a teacup holds heat. "Good morning, Maple Harbor," she said. "This is Lila with Open Sky. I'm thinking today about things we keep and things we let go." I wiped the counter and didn't think much of it until she laughed at something. A small, round laugh, like a stone skipping twice and disappearing. That sound wasn't radio to me. It was my daughter, Rachel, laughing in the front seat of her old Civic, turning up the heater to blast the fog from the windshield while I scolded her to slow down over the drawbridge. It had been 3 years since the icy night took her car and sent it out of sight. There were tulips on her grave in spring, leaves in fall, and snow once that fell in a perfect white quilt that made the cemetery look like someone else's porch. Grief taught me to live with the facts, the road, the curve, the guardrail they repaired, but grief doesn't know what to do with laughter. It came into the kitchen and put a hand on the radio. I told myself it was a trick of timbre, a fluke. Lots of young women push their syllables like that up here, a little coastal and a little country. The program went on. She told a story about a thrift store that had an old brass lamp shaped like a fish. She said she couldn't afford it, but she kept going in to visit it until one day it was gone. "We don't own the good things," she said. "Sometimes they are just ours to notice." It sounded like something Rachel would have said after rescuing a chipped teacup from a yard sale. "It has survived too much to be ignored, Mom." I turned the radio off. My hands were steadier when I returned to them and folded a pile of dish towels. I reminded myself that a voice can be a coincidence. Names, too. This new host was called Lila, not Rachel. The heart doesn't care. It kept beating in my ears like I'd climbed a hill. I decided on a walk. Maple Harbor is the kind of place where people know your dog's name and your favorite pie at Harbor Diner. I don't have a dog, but I do have a pie. Pete at the diner keeps me a slice of Marionberry back in the refrigerated case, and I nurse my coffee until the waitress, Denise, says, "Evie, if you want the whole pie, just say so." My neighbor and oldest friend, Marion, a chalk-haired woman in a rain parka who runs the thrift shop on Alder Street, spotted me before I got past the diner. She waved, came out, and we split the pie like we had done since we were 20 and had borrowed earrings and a prom dress between us. "You look like you saw a ghost," Marion said, dipping her spoon into the purple, glossy filling. "A radio ghost," I said. I told her about the show and the laugh, and I tried to keep my voice casual, but it tripped over the word laugh, and both of us stared a second at the spoonfuls we held in midair. Some pauses say more than a paragraph. Marion swallowed, set her spoon down, and pushed her glasses up with a knuckle. "People have doppelgangers," she said. "Voices, too. You're the librarian. You know that better than anyone. And you also know grief is a ventriloquist. It throws voices." "I know," I said, "and I also know the way my daughter said the word banana, like it had a secret joke folded inside it." Marion touched my wrist. "Do what you always tell everyone else to do when the facts feel slippery. Keep notes. Listen more than once. Be scientific about it." I laughed. "You're the one who believes in angels taking numbers at the bakery." "Who says angels can't appreciate a good pastry?" she said and grinned. "Seriously, Evie, you're not fragile. You're precise. If this is nothing, you'll prove it to yourself. If it's something, you'll have a record." So I did. I went home and tore a page off the shopping list stuck to my fridge by a magnet shaped like a crab and wrote, "Open Sky, Lila, 10:03 a.m. Laugh like Rachel." I set the note beside the radio as if I were leaving instructions for a house sitter. Then I made a promise to myself I would either let this go after a week of listening or I would allow it to pull me by the sleeve wherever it wanted to go. The second day started from a hairline crack in the dark when the radio woke by accident. I must have twisted the dial as I was dusting. The red line glowed in the night like a thin ember, and the voice was back, softer now, a late-night version of the morning show. I recognized how she settled the ends of sentences, letting them fall like a leaf that had farther to go, but decided to rest. She said, "Call me, Maple Harbor. What do you keep? What do you let go?" A man called to talk about when he gave up his father's pocket knife because he thought he'd lose it. She told him something gentle I couldn't repeat now word for word, but it was like someone smoothing a sheet tight so there were no wrinkles to catch on. And then, out of nowhere, she hummed a few bars of a lullaby I used to sing to Rachel, low and simple, the one I sang every night when she was small and wet-headed from the bath. I froze so wholly I forgot to breathe. By morning, I had purchased batteries for the old tape recorder in my sewing basket. It's funny what a person saves. Cassettes had been fossils for years, but I owned a shoebox with 3 blank ones rattling in it. I labeled one "Open Sky" in ballpoint and told myself I was a lunatic of the respectable kind, like those birders who will camp in the rain for a flash of a rare wing. I recorded that day's show. In one of those plain miracles that keep the newspaper in business, the voice did the most dangerous thing a memory can do. It told me something only I should have known. "Sometimes the house keeps the birthday," the woman said on air, and her words curled under the cabinet, reached for my ankles. Think of your childhood kitchen. The clock that ticked too loud, the grease shine above the stove, a drawer that always stuck. We all have a drawer like that. She laughed, and it was like I had my head in Rachel's old bedroom, eavesdropping on a sleepover. "My mother had a stuck drawer in our kitchen," she continued. "She kept rubber bands and the good scissors in it. Every year on my birthday, she would try to make it glide like a magician. You could hear the scrape from the driveway, and no cake was coming." I stood up from the table so fast my chair bit the linoleum. I looked at the oak drawers Daniel had sanded down when we moved into this bungalow 32 years ago, and I saw the kitchen we had before, in the rented house near the school bus stop, the chip on the sink rim, the cabinet door that solemnly refused to shut. I remembered how the top left drawer had stuck, and how on Rachel's 10th birthday I had yanked it open to grab the lighter for 10 stubborn candles, and the whole drawer had come loose, flinging a tangle of rubber bands, chalk, elastics, and crumbs into my lap while everyone laughed. I had told that story 3 times in my life, once to my sister in California, twice to Rachel. The show had recorded none of us, and yet. I played the tape back 4 times in a row, then took it next door to Marion. She listened with her mouth pursed, a knot forming between her eyebrows the way it had when we were girls and the math teacher handed a test out. "Could be coincidence," she said. "She tells a lot of, everyone has this kinds of stories." "Rubber bands and good scissors in the stuck drawer?" I asked. "Okay, not everyone," she said. "But Evie, you're smart enough to know the only way to settle this is to go find her. Call the station. Or drive down there and be normal and ask for a bumper sticker like all the old ladies." "I could," I said. "Or I could call in. I could hear if she answers me like a stranger does, or like she's..." "Like she's what?" Marion asked. "Like she's not a stranger," I said. And I heard how ridiculous I sounded. A woman with a putty knife trying to scrape hope off old paint. So I did both. I called the station and got an answering machine with a cheerful jingle. "K-Maple, the heart of the harbor." I left my name and number and that I had a comment for Lila. I didn't say what it was. Then I put on my raincoat and my rubber boots and walked the 1.5 miles to the station on Bay Street, past the cannery-turned-antique mall, the shuttered cinema with a snub-nosed marquee, and the dock where the small crab boats bobbed like hopeful toys. The station door had a bell on it, and a kid with a hoodie and a headset behind the glass slid it open with one foot. He had pizza sticker hands and a kindness around the eyes of a person not yet ruined by phones. "Can I help you?" he asked. I'm a listener," I said, which sounded like a lie even to me. "I wanted to leave a note for Lila." "Dropbox," he said, pointing, and I wrote, "From Evelyn. Your story about the stuck drawer made my day," which would either be completely mundane or exactly the rope I needed. I didn't see her that day, but I kept seeing the outline of her in the places I walked, a shadow moving 2 seconds ahead of me, a person in a coat that turned a corner as I lifted my hand to wave. This is something I learned in my years at the library. Readers will forgive nearly anything if you tell the truth about the human heart. The raw truth is simple. I wanted a ghost to be a girl with a job and a jacket and a light over her kitchen table and a mother to call. I wanted my daughter back, but on the way to that impossible thing, I would have taken second prize gladly. Someone with her voice who was not a con, not a trick, but a thread that led me somewhere that didn't hurt. The answer came in the middle of the night, rattling the kitchen window with wind. The phone rang, the landline I still keep because cell service out here is moody as a cat. My fingers reached in the dark like they always have, each person I love folded into the way I pick up a phone. I said hello and heard the soft clearing of a throat. "Is this Evelyn?" the voice asked. "I'm sorry to call so late. It's Lila." When you imagine speaking to someone you've imagined, your mind gives you little scripts to stand behind, but they tore like tissue as soon as the call was real. "Hello," I said, and my mouth had to remind itself what to do next. "Yes, I left a note." "You said something about a drawer," she said. "I keep thinking about that stupid drawer. Would you ever want to do a segment on the show with me? People talk about kitchen drawers all the time." I'm teasing, sort of. Maybe not the drawer, maybe something else. I'm trying to bring more voices in, tiny local things. When she paused, I heard the faint hum of the board, the way a studio breathes through wires. I could almost imagine the on-air sign lit in the dark above her head, although I knew she wouldn't be on in the middle of the night. "Could we meet first?" I asked, before I lost my nerve. "Coffee. I'm not calling to complain, and I'm not crazy. The librarians would have warned you. But your voice sounds like someone I knew, someone I loved. I just want to meet you. I can bring you a pie." People say a pie like a passport, the America of goodwill. She waited long enough for me to count 3 heartbeats and then said, gentle as a person tucking in a child, "All right, Evelyn, Harbor Diner, 11 tomorrow. I'll be the one with the sorry hair." "Bring your sorry hair," I said. "I'll bring the good pie." The rain eased toward morning. The diner windows fogged around the edges of the neon sign, and the coffee tasted like it always has here. Like the first cup in heaven won't be any better. I sat in the booth by the window so I could watch Bay Street and gather myself. When the door opened and the bell jingled, 3 people came in on the same gust, 2 men in work coats and a woman with a knit cap who unhooked it and shook loose hair the color of wet wheat. She had the posture of someone always thinking 3 moves ahead, and even from the door I could hear the rustle of nervousness, the way a person pulls their shoulders up when they worry they owe someone an apology. She turned and scanned the room. Her face was not my daughter's. It was like an echo of it. The same high cheekbones, the same dimple, yes, but less roundness in the chin, more scatter in the freckles. But when she said, "Evelyn?" across the room, my whole body recognized her. It is a strange thing to feel your own bones nod. We did the dance most polite women of Oregon do when meeting someone old enough to be their mother. Should we hug? Should we not? I offered my hand and she took it in both of hers, warm, dry, a version of steadiness. "I brought pie," I said, and slid the white box across the table. "You didn't," she said, like someone who has been raised around good manners but not enough pie. "I should have brought something too." "You brought what I asked for," I said. "Your voice." She smiled with the left side of her mouth, like my daughter did when she wanted to be kind and couldn't find the words yet. She told me about the show, about how she pitched a local format to the manager after the last host left for a bigger market up the coast. She said she didn't go to journalism school. She had studied plant biology at a state college inland and came out here for the air. She said she liked how the town listened back, how a fisherman would call to report whales in the bay, and a woman would call to say she saw a boy return a wallet he found at the bank, and a man would call to ask if anyone had a used trumpet for his granddaughter. I listened and watched the way she pushed her hair behind her ear. The third time she did it, I saw it. The small crescent mark behind the lobe, a pale comma where the skin never quite decided to be smooth. My breath hitched. "Is that a birthmark?" I asked. "Behind your ear." She touched it with a finger. "Oh, this? I've had it forever. My mom used to call it my comma, like my sentences weren't finished. That makes sense, I guess. I talk too much on the radio." "Rachel had one just like it," I said, before I could stop myself. She waited, and I understood I had to say it out loud, as if speaking the shape of this search would let it sit down. "My daughter died 3 years ago. Her name was Rachel. At the library, she made the kids laugh during story time because she did the voices. She had that mark behind her ear. She made apple crisp every fall and forgot the salt 3 times and cried and served it anyway. She laughed the way you do when you remember an inside joke all by yourself." "I'm so sorry," she said. And her eyes did something I trust in young people. They stayed on my face and didn't search for a place to rest where the pain wasn't. "People call me every week and tell me stories about loss like that," she added. "I always try to say something decent, but there are only about 5 decent things to say." "I know all 5, I said, and we smiled. "Where did your daughter go to school?" she asked, as if placing a pin on a map. "Here," I said, "born and raised in Maple Harbor. She was born at Mariners Bay Medical back when it still had a maternity ward. They shut it down when the big hospital inland opened." "My birth certificate says I was born in Newport," Lila said, almost absently, like someone looking through a drawer and announcing each object. "My mom, my adoptive mom, told me they drove out there to meet me. She told me once it was very fast. I don't remember if that was the drive or the decision." "Your adoptive mom," I repeated, not because I hadn't heard her, but because sometimes language needs help lifting the heavy box. "Yeah," she said. And she looked down, then up again, choosing. "I was adopted at 2 days old. They told me that was the plan from the start. I never felt like a secret, just a story everyone told carefully." She pushed her hair back again, and the comma behind her ear seemed brighter, a small moon. When the waitress brought the coffee, we ate our pie and made the kind of conversation 2 women make at a bus stop waiting for the same bus to show up 5 years late. I told her about Daniel, about the way he once hung a string of lights across the porch in July because he wanted Christmas in the garden. I told her about the kids at the library who thought my reading voice made lizards sound like cowboys. She told me about the first time her show landed, when she opened the phone lines and the first caller was a man who had lost his wife in the spring and wanted to read a poem he wrote on a napkin. I told him radio is only sound, she said, and that a napkin poem is perfect because it sounds like it was written for someone to listen to. Then she asked for a napkin of her own and pulled a pen from her pocket. "Would you talk to me on air? I mean, not your whole story unless you want to. Maybe we just talk about a kitchen drawer and an apple crisp, a small slice of everything. People like small slices." "We can try," I said, "but only if you answer me one question first." I pulled the pen from my own purse, and I drew a small spiral on the napkin, a circle within a circle. "When you were little, did you have a cowlick that made your hair part funny right here?" I put a finger at the top of my head. "One that never really learned to behave?" She laughed. "Yes," she said. "My mom used to lick her thumb and try to smooth it down, and I would make faces. How did you know that?" "Because I did that to my daughter for 15 years, I said, "and her hair scolded me." She sat back and looked at me for a long, slow moment. "It is possible to hear a hinge open inside a person." "Evelyn," she said, almost whispering, "may I ask you something back? Do you own any of her baby things? Something that might have her name?" "In a box in my closet," I said. "A hospital bracelet, her little knit hat, a paper foot stamped in purple ink." "Would you bring them to me?" she asked. "Or would you let me come by?" Or, if that feels like too much, you can say no. I think I might have mine too. My mom keeps things like that. If we put them side by side and they make sense, we'll have to figure out what to do with that. If they don't, we'll have pie again and we'll laugh at ourselves for making life more dramatic than it needs to be. That sounds like a plan, I said, and my voice did that shaking thing it does when it tries to hold two kinds of relief at once. The relief you get from a plan and the relief you get from not being the only one who has to make it. We picked a day. We hugged goodbye. Outside, the clouds unbuttoned for an hour, and a pool of light warmed the parking lot so that the puddles showed blue sky for the first time in days. I walked home with the radio voice moving beside me, a friend I hadn't met yet, and maybe had known for a long time already. That night, I pulled the cedar box from the shelf in my closet and set it on the bed. I sat in the sag in the mattress Daniel made on his side and opened the lid. Inside, I had placed Rachel's baby hat, the color of butter, small enough for an orange, the hospital tag, white plastic, her last name printed in the neat block hand of a nurse, a photo of me with hair that looked like a frightened poodle holding a red-faced infant whose mouth formed a perfect O of outrage, and the purple foot stamp that had once made the labor nurse laugh because the left toe print had smeared. I laid everything out on the quilt as if blessing it. I had no idea what I was doing, only that I would bring these things to the diner the next day, and that I would take a thermos of courage with me. When I slid into the booth the next morning, Marion was already there with 2 envelopes. "I'm coming with you," she said. "Don't argue with a woman in a parka." "I haven't argued with you successfully since 1975, I said. "What's that?" "Something from the thrift shop," she said. "A little journal you could give her after you talk, for notes. If this turns into a story, you two might need a place to keep it. And this other envelope is something else, a card with Detective Brooks's number." "Marion," I said, half scolding, half grateful. "We're not starting a crime show." "No," she said, "we're starting a truth show. Sometimes the police know where the doors are." Lila came in with her hair tucked into a cap. She waved at us, then skidded a little on the wet tile and caught herself. And all at once, she was a child to me. Someone I wanted to warn about sharp corners for the next 20 years. She slid into the booth and set a small tin on the table. It had a painted bird on the lid. "My mom's tin," she said softly. "She keeps the sentimental things in actual tins. It's an illness." I opened the cedar box. She opened the tin. We sat with our heads nearly touching, 3 women hunched over a table like schoolgirls with a secret. She pulled a hospital bracelet free and set it next to mine. Hers had "Baby Girl Heart" typed in block letters. Mine had "Baby Girl Harris" written in ink. The date and time on both were 1 day apart. The nurse's hand had made the same fat loops on the 9 and the 6. We stared and held our breath. We put the little hats side by side. They were not twins, but they were cousins, the kind of hats knit by the same woman at the volunteer circle in the church basement. I held the footprints. She held hers. The left toe on both had a blurred smudge, like a footprint that couldn't quite stop moving. Marion wiped her eyes and then pretended to bang her head against the booth so she wouldn't cry in public. "Well," she said, "either the Lord has a sense of humor or someone messed around with the script." Lila looked up at me. "I feel like I should tell you a story," she said. "My mom told me that she and my dad got a call the day I was born. The person said, 'She's here.'" They drove to the hospital and sat in the hallway and waited. A nurse came out with me and let my mom hold me and told her my birth mother wanted me to have a name right away. My mom cried and named me on the spot. They signed papers with a social worker that afternoon. It was quick, she said. A clean adoption, they call it, when no one sues anyone, as if there's a dirty version too. She laughed, and then the laugh broke into something else. She always said she didn't need to know anymore. She didn't want to be greedy. You can love a child without a map of where they came from. You just walk with them wherever they go. My story is less clean, I said. My husband and I went to Mariner's Bay at midnight on a Wednesday after my water broke while I was reading in bed. I cursed like a sailor and swore I'd never forgive Daniel for doing this to me. He cried and kept saying sorry like he was a waiter who spilled soup. We met a nurse named Nora who said she was from Idaho and didn't like fog. She tied the bracelet on me and then on the baby. She stamped the foot. I remember the window was crusted with salt and there was a gull that pecked at the glass like he wanted in on the gossip. We took Rachel home on Saturday. No social worker, no waiting in the hall, just me bleeding and crying and certain I was doing everything wrong and that someday she would publish a book called My Mother Didn't Know How to Hold a Baby. Both can be true, Marion said. A quick adoption and an anxious new mother. But you're thinking what I'm thinking, aren't you? I'm thinking about twins, Lila said, and said it like a person who didn't mean to be brave and then was. I'm thinking about the kind of secret that is softer than the ones people keep to protect themselves, but harder to break because it was wrapped in good intentions. We can't jump there without a map, I said, but we can look for one. I pulled the card with Detective Brooks's name on it from the envelope and set it on the table. He helped me once when a library book went missing and then turned up on a fishing boat covered in recipes written in pencil. He knows that not every mystery ends with a handcuff. Sometimes it ends with a letter. We went together that afternoon, the three of us, because I didn't want Lila walking into the police station alone with her hope in her pocket, and because Marion doesn't let me do anything important without her. Detective Brooks had a nice smile and a mustache that made him look like every cop from a movie set in 1978, but kinder. He listened to us. He didn't roll his eyes. He didn't patronize. He said the word huh a lot, the kind of huh that isn't lazy, but contemplative. He asked if we had the birth certificate copies. We did. He asked if we knew the name of the nurse. I told him what I remembered. He asked if Lila's parents, the Harts, would speak with him. Lila said she could ask, but that they would be wary. People who adopt children sometimes build their privacy like a shell so the world doesn't pick at them. He nodded. He told us adoption records in this state are sealed without a court order. He told us the hospital had closed, that records were likely boxed and in a storage unit owned by the county or destroyed. He said he had a friend at the clerk's office who owed him a favor. Sometimes we look at the map they give us, he said, and sometimes we draw our own. If you'll allow me, I'll poke gently and see what leaks. When we left, Marion said, I like that one. And Lila said, I'm scared to like any of this. And I nodded, because both were as true as the rain. The next days turned into a corridor of small doors. We opened them one by one. I called my sister in California and told her the parts of the story that wouldn't keep her up at night. She said, only you would find your child on a radio station, Evie. And then softer, or God would give you back a voice because he knows you can't give up the sound of it. Lila spoke to her parents and then called me, crying. They don't want to be villains, she said, and they aren't, but they are terrified that if we open this, the wind will come in and blow everything down. Then we'll hold on to the table, I said, and if the wind comes, we'll let it take what it's meant to and keep what matters. She went quiet, and then she said, you sound like a person who was lost before. I am, I said. Detective Brooks called with his gentle persistence. He had found a woman named Nora Whitcomb who had been a nurse at Mariners Bay 30 years ago, retired now. He asked if Lila and I would come with him. We went in my car because my car smells like peppermint and old paper, and I thought a man with a gun and a badge looks less like a threat when he is buckled in a Subaru between two women with thermoses. Nora lived in a ranch house on the edge of town with yellow siding and a bird feeder that had hosted generations of small birds. She answered the door in a cardigan with one elbow patched and a face that had been beautiful and now had turned all its edges to compassion. She invited us in and had tea set already, which made me like her immediately. Detective Brooks explained what he could in the careful way people learn to tell stories that might break someone's heart. Nora listened. She closed her eyes once, like a person remembers a street they drove on too fast. Then she got up and went down the hallway to a closet and came back carrying an old green ledger the size of a pizza box. I shouldn't have this, she said, but I didn't know who would if I didn't. When they shut the ward, they were going to throw the old ledgers out. I took one, and then I felt like a thief and went back for the rest. I kept the ones from the 80s and 90s. I figured the earlier ones might belong in a museum. The later ones would belong to the county, if the county remembered we existed. She set the ledger on the coffee table. We leaned in. Her handwriting was unmistakable. Nurses who have charted 1,000 times write like a metronome. Column after column listed the dates, the mother's names, the babies, weight, notes, colicky, latch good, monitor left ear, mother tired, father nervous but helpful. On the page for the week Rachel was born, there was a list of 3 births, my name, another woman I knew from the post office, and a third, mother unknown, listed only as baby girl, adoption. The times were close, the days a breath apart. The nurse's initial in the margin was NW for some lines. Others were in a hand that looped with a flourish on the capital letters. "Look," Lila said quietly. The nurse had scribbled in pencil at the side of the adoption line, then erased it so lightly the ghost of the note remained. "Twin?" The question sat there in the paper like a nervous signature. Nora closed her eyes again. "I got in trouble for that," she said. "That was me. I wrote Win because there were 2 sets of bracelets with the same mother charted earlier that night. The doctor took the chart and told me never to write the word twin, unless I had the legal paperwork. He told me sometimes things go better if we don't make them difficult for everyone. He said the adoption would go faster if the forms all said single birth. He said the 2 babies had different APGARs, and that meant it was cleaner to separate them on paper too. I was 25, and I did what I was told, and then I went home and cried in the shower so my husband wouldn't see." She looked at me and then at Lila. "I have thought about you, whoever you were, for 30 years, she said. "I knew I had done something that would keep 2 people from a truth that was owed to them, and I didn't write it down except that once, and I took it back because I was scared. I don't know if I can ask for forgiveness for that. I can only give you the book and my name." We sat in the room with the birds pecking at seed and listened to our own breathing. Detective Brooks put a hand on the ledger like a priest blessing bread. Lila reached for my hand, and I felt the small tremble that moved through her, and I knew it because it had visited me the day we buried Rachel, a kind of tremble that is not fear but awe at the size of a thing. There is a difference between knowing a thing in the bones and carrying the paper that proves it. We walked out of Nora's house with both. In the car, Lila leaned forward, pressed her hands to her eyes, and let out the smallest sound, the whimper a child makes trying to be brave in a clinic waiting room, and I wanted to be her waiting room mother for the rest of my life. I didn't say anything in the parking lot. I turned the key and drove to the edge of the bay where the water meets the land and the gulls argue like old married couples. We sat and watched the tide slide in under the old pilings, and then she spoke. "If I am Rachel's twin," she said, "then the person I have been all this time is still me, but my map is different. My parents love me enough to make any map home. I don't want to hurt them because I learned their love in a language that did not include this word, twin. I don't know how to be this without breaking something. You don't have to know how to be this," I said. "You are this. We will tell the truth with you. That is how things don't break. They bend. And if they break, it is because they were brittle, not because you breathed. Marion texted us, 'You okay?' from the diner, and we sent back a heart. Then we went to my house. I made soup. Lila sat at the kitchen table and held a spoon and did not eat for a while. The rain started again, pattering like a small kindness on the roof. I brought the cedar box out again and set it next to her elbow, the way you put a candle on a table when the lights are out. "Tell me about her," she said. "Tell me about Rachel. Tell me things that are not in a ledger." "She was brave about snakes and afraid of roller coasters," I said. "She thought raisins were grapes that heard bad news. She made small forts behind the couch with books and a flashlight. She got her driver's license on a Thursday and cried when she backed into a garbage can and then named the garbage can Maurice and apologized to it every time she took the trash out. She had a laugh like a field of violets if violets could laugh. She listened to people like she was looking for the sentence they'd been trying to say their whole lives." I paused. "And you?" Lila looked at her hands the way people do when they start telling the truth, to check that they still belong to them. I planted vegetables and then couldn't bring myself to pick them because I liked how they looked growing. I wanted to be a person who traveled, but I love home like a second skin. When I was a kid, I made radio shows on a tape recorder and pretended to interview my teacher about what she ate for breakfast. I am good at catching cats that don't want to be caught. I've always been the person friends call at 2 a.m. when they need to say a thing out loud before it turns into a monster. And sometimes I can't go to sleep unless I listen to someone talking in the dark. Me too, I said, and we both glanced at the radio on the counter as if it were a friend who had orchestrated this whole meeting. I called Daniel's brother that night, the first call I had made to him in months. He answered on the third ring and said my name with the husky voice, people reserve for the people who know their worst jokes by heart. I told him we had discovered something. He said he would come for the weekend. I called my son, who lives across the mountains, and he listened and was quiet and said he would drive in if needed. Lila called her parents. There are conversations that make you wish a third option existed between the words yes and no. Her parents didn't shout. They didn't slam. But they did say, "We need time." She gave it to them by not calling back right away with more information than anyone could digest over leftovers at the kitchen table. Detective Brooks told us we might want a lawyer only to help us navigate the sealed records, and that a gentle lawyer is a wonderful thing in a world where most of us picture the other kind. Marion told us she had already made a list of such lawyers, and that if anyone tried to hurt Lila with legal words, she would sit in their waiting room every day and knit a scarf so long it would trip them on their way to court. I told her to pace herself. She asked me if I had any extra yarn. We decided on something small and enormous. We would go on air, not because radio should tell our story before our feet knew it, but because radio brought us here. And sometimes a thing opens the door and deserves a chance to carry the news down the hall. Lila asked for a Sunday evening slot where the town listens with dishes and soapy water. She asked me if I would sit with her. I said I would sit for 100 years if it helped her stand for 1 hour. We didn't plan the whole thing. We agreed on the outline. We would talk about kitchen drawers, about pie and apple crisp, about a nurse named Nora who wrote the truth lightly and then softly erased it, and about a ledger that remembered what people asked it to forget. We would say the word twin out loud because the world has a lot of words, and sometimes it is the shortest ones that unlock a heart. We would not say the names of people who could be hurt by a story told without their permission. At 5 o'clock on Sunday, the studio was a warm box with 2 microphones and a red light that made my throat dry. Lila sat across from me with her notes. She wore a sweater the color of fresh moss. Her hair was back, and the comma behind her ear was tucked away, but I felt it like a lighthouse I could navigate by from the kitchen table of my old age. She opened the show with her voice that could make a room act like it belonged to one person at a time. "Good evening, Maple Harbor," she said. "It's Lila. Tonight I have a friend with me. We're not calling her a guest because guests leave. She is a friend, and if you keep listening, she might be yours too." She asked me to tell the drawer story. I did. She asked me to describe the apple crisp, and I did, and people probably heard a woman who burns sugar into love. Then she told her own small story about waiting in a hospital hallway 20-something years ago. She let the quiet sit like a cushion we could rest on, and then she said, clear and true, "Sometimes a town keeps a secret for us until we are ready to carry it. Sometimes a secret keeps us. I learned this week that the voice I use to talk to you, this one, sounds like someone you know. I learned it sounds like the daughter of the woman across the table from me. I learned that sometimes the heart is right about a thing the mind can only write down later. I learned twin." There was a beat where all the breaths we hadn't taken showed up at once. Then the phone lines lit as if someone had turned on an irrigation pump. A woman called and said she had twin brothers who fought like cats until they were 50 and then started making each other grilled cheese sandwiches. A man called and said he never knew his birth mother and didn't need to, but loved the idea that she baked muffins on Sundays because it helped him feel like a person someone once fed. A teenage girl called and said she sometimes felt like she had two lives in her, and Lila told her gently that most of us do, and that perhaps that was the point. We did not get through the hour with dry eyes. Most radio hosts do not cry on air because it makes people want to change the station. Lila did quietly, and no one changed the station because you do not turn away from a woman who tells you something true in a voice you wish you could put in your pocket. I did not cry, not because I am stronger, but because my tears had already learned to do their work and then go home. I held her hand under the table when she read a note a caller had left at the front desk. To the woman with the voice that sounds like my husband, it said. Thank you for making the empty chair friendlier. After the show, the station manager put his head around the door, his face a little gray, as managers' faces get when they picture advertisers fleeing in a herd. Lila told him we weren't naming names. He sighed and said he didn't mind crying if it came with ratings. He asked if we could do a follow-up. I told him to drink a glass of water and stop thinking in follow-ups. He laughed and walked away, muttering about peanuts and elephants, which in my head is how some men say, I am overwhelmed, but your story is better than the weather. The next week, Lila's parents knocked on my front door with a plate of cookies, and their fear like a third person behind them. I made tea. They cried. They told me what any good parents would. They had loved their baby with a love that had no adoption clause hidden in it. They told me they had said yes because someone told them yes was needed, and they had never once, not for a second, thought that yes had stolen anything from anyone. I believed them. We stood in the doorway, each trying to outkind the other, the way people do when they are in a room made of good intentions and sorrow. When they left, Lila hugged them on the sidewalk, and the way her mother held her made me want to kiss the woman's hands, because they had learned how to love my daughter's sister for all these years. If there is a villain in this story, I have never met him. Perhaps there was a doctor who wanted to simplify paperwork. Perhaps there was a social worker who thought 2 babies in 2 homes would be better than 2 babies in 1. Perhaps there was a pastor who whispered, God provides, into the ear of a woman who did not feel provided for. Most secrets are built by people in a hurry with their best and worst selves, hand in hand. I went to the cemetery with Lila in late October, the leaves turned and the air smelling like apples and smoke. We brought chrysanthemums because the woman at the floral shop said they hold their heads up in the rain better than daisies. We stood by Rachel's stone. It is flat and simple because I didn't know how to boss stone around the way I do books. Lila knelt and put her palm on the granite as if measuring warmth, and for a minute I wanted to say, she's under there, the way you tell a child where a turtle sleeps, but of course she wasn't under there. She was in the new space that had opened in the air between me and a woman who resembled her, a space where another kind of daughter might stand. We didn't speak for a while. Then Lila told Rachel everything. She did it like a big sister telling a little sister about the roads to avoid and the diner to always visit when you want the pie. She told her about the radio and the ledger's cowardice, and our own. About Marion, who made kindness rude for sport. About Detective Brooks, whose mustache made us trust him. About her mother, who loved her first, and her second mother. She looked at me when she said it. Who had loved her unknowingly for years. She told her about the yellow hat and the purple foot, about the missing cookbooks she had rescued from garage sales, about the house she hoped to buy if radio paid enough, about the cat who had learned to sleep on her lap, about the lemon tree. She would never be able to grow here because we settle for rhododendrons, and about how she had not known that a person could carry 2 names in their chest and not die from the echo. A week later, she had me on the show again to talk about books. We did an hour where people called in to confess the last book that made them feel 9 years old again. It did not matter what the book was. It mattered that there are 9-year-old places inside us waiting to be read to. Afterward, we walked down to the pier where children throw French fries to gulls, and I told her the one thing I had not said yet, the thing that felt like tossing my last anchor and watching it go down. I don't want to make you my daughter, I said. I want to make room for what you are without replacing what I lost. That's a trick none of us were taught. We think we can only hold one thing at a time, but I have two hands. If you want, one will always be open for you. She took my hand, and then she did another brave thing. She handed me a folded paper. It was a page from the little journal Marion had given her. She had written in her quick hand, "The first time I spoke on the radio and felt like it mattered, I was 10 and had a walkie-talkie under the blanket. I said into the dark, 'Is anyone there?' And someone said back, 'I am.' That's what this feels like." She moved into a bigger apartment with a window that faced the bay, the kind of place where the gulls act like old ladies knocking on a door to borrow sugar. The station manager put her show on in the evenings too, and men who worked boats called to tell her the state of the sea. She came for dinner every Wednesday when I made soup on purpose instead of because I forgot everything else. Her parents came once a month and brought their dog, who shed on my rug and made me laugh like the day I first owned my own rug. Marion built us a scrapbook that was half police report and half church bulletin, a ledger entry photocopy, a napkin with a coffee ring, a pressed leaf, the card with Detective Brooks's name, a note from Nora saying she had slept better since she let the truth out of the closet and into the light. There were bumps. A woman wrote a letter to the editor accusing Lila of making things up for attention. People who haven't needed courage often think attention and courage are cousins. They aren't. Lila put the letter on her fridge and brought me groceries and said she would rather tell something brave and be called names than keep quiet and be called polite. The Hearts had a rough week where everything felt like Velcro, and then they smoothed. Love can't resist an excuse to show off. I had a bad night where I dreamed of the drawbridge and woke sweating and had to stand in the kitchen and put my hand on the radio like a person swears on a Bible. The radio was cool under my palm, and I prayed to the frequency that had brought me to a table with a girl who looked like my daughter and sounded like her and was not her and was. Then I did what grief taught me to do. I put the kettle on and waited for the steam to know I was still here. In December, the station hosted a toy drive in the parking lot, a line of cars and a tent and cocoa and paper cups. The town came like they always do when the words, "Someone needs," get written on a sign. An older man in a work jacket came up to Lila and told her he had listened to radio all his life, and if he had to choose between baseball and a woman telling the truth, he would pick the woman most days and never tell his friends. An 8th grade girl handed her a packet of stickers and said she was going to study journalism and also biology and also build a bakery. We thanked her because we know not to tell 18-year-olds that their dreams have to pick one thing. That night, we all went to my house and decorated the little tree I buy every year and then plant in the yard in March. Lila put the first ornament on, a paper star Rachel made in 5th grade, whose top point is bent. She asked if this was okay, and I nodded. We ate cookies and watched the lights blink and pretended to argue about whether tinsel is tacky. Lila fell asleep for a few minutes on the couch with a book open on her chest, her hair parting around that stubborn cowlick, and for one moment the room held 3 things at once, without breaking. A past that hurt but didn't harm, a present that could carry what was placed in its arms, and a future that looked back at us through the twinkle lights and said, "Even I don't know everything, isn't that a relief?" Spring brought fog and then swallows under the eaves, and then the pale explosion of rhododendrons like pink thunderheads along the fence. Lila's show grew. A man from a bigger station inland wrote her an email that sounded like a poor man offering a rich woman a coupon. She kept our station, our town. Nora came by with her ledger, which we had photocopied and returned, and brought brownies and told us she had found letters in a box in her attic, notes she had written herself and never mailed, addressed to baby girl, one for each year since the erased pencil line. She gave them to Lila. We read one out loud. It said, "I don't know who you are, and that seems wrong, and I am trying to forgive a younger me for letting someone older tell her how to write a story. If this reaches you, I hope you like the smell of rain." On the anniversary of Rachel's death, I asked Lila if she would come to the bay with me. We took paper boats we had made from old maps that showed roads as they were 15 years ago, dead ends where roundabouts now spin, streets that had changed names because towns do that when they want to forget something. We wrote our names on the boats and Rachel's too. We walked to the end of the pier and we set the boats on the water. We watched them bob, move, tip, and then surrender to the small sips of the tide. We stood until we couldn't see them. Then we stood some more. When we walked back, Lila took my elbow at the step that always trips me. The one I forget to lift for, the one Daniel used to call the burglar deterrent, which is how kind men admit their wives' age in increments. I don't have a moral for you like a ribbon for your hair. I don't think the world stores these kinds of stories in a box marked lessons. But I will say this, if you hear a voice that sounds like a person you lost, you are not obligated to call it a coincidence. You are not obligated to ignore it because grown-ups don't chase radios. You are allowed to follow a thread, even if you don't know where it goes. You are allowed to ask strangers to become less strange to you. You're allowed to call a detective and ask him to bring his mustache and his ledger-trusting hands. You are allowed to be afraid, and you are allowed to be braver on the second day than on the first. One afternoon in early summer, a woman came into the library where I still volunteer on Thursdays. She had her granddaughter with her, a child with a missing front tooth and a polka dot jacket. The woman returned a stack of books and said, "My mother used to read to me with voices like that." The girl took a book and said, "She still does." I stamped the card and slid it into the back pocket, and the soft clunk the stamp made felt to me like a small town saying yes to itself. That night, Lila and I ate dinner in the backyard, the kind of dinner that is more about sitting than eating. She told me she might apply for a grant to make a series about secrets small towns keep that are less about shame and more about survival. "I want to tell stories where people aren't wrong. They're just unfinished," she said. "I want to talk to women like Nora who erased a word and then lived with it, and to mothers who said yes because someone told them yes was required, and to teenagers who think a voice on the radio is a friend and are right. You know the best part about secrets," I said? "When they are told gently enough, they become stories instead. Stories you can hold up to the light and say, 'Look, it was like this. It hurt. It healed. It wasn't simple. We were kind to each other anyway.'" She leaned back in her chair and put her feet on the rung and let the evening wrap around her shoulders. "Evelyn," she said, "what do you keep? And what do you let go?" "I keep the sound of my daughter laughing in a car with the heat on too high," I said. "I keep the way a nurse wrote a word she wasn't supposed to and then almost took it back, and I keep the part where she stopped taking it back. I keep a napkin with a coffee ring because it touched the table when you said twin out loud and the world kept going. I keep the radio on even when the room is quiet, and I let go of the idea that love has to choose one name at a time." She nodded, and then she looked at me with an expression I recognized from years of reading children's faces during story hour, the look that says a person is listening for the end of the sentence that will let them sleep. I took a breath and finished the sentence we had been writing together for months. "If you were sitting here with me," I said into the soft, humming air, into the evening where the gulls argued and the lights on Bay Street switched on one by one, "what would you do if you turned on the radio and heard a voice you thought you'd lost? Would you call back and say, 'I am here'? Would you get up from your chair and put your hand on the cool plastic and say the name you had given the voice? Would you follow it to a diner and a ledger and a porch with a blanket and a pot of soup? Would you forgive the ones who erred on the side of speed? Would you let a new story move into your house where the stuck drawer used to live? I can't tell you what to do. I can only say what I did and what happened after. I listened. The voice listened back. In a town made of rain and gulls and people who know what kind of pie you like, I walked around with a feeling like a key in my pocket. And when I used it, the door opened as if it had been waiting. I heard my daughter's laugh again, not the same one, but not different either. I kept it. I set it on the table. I pointed to it when company came and said, "Look, this is the sound I collect now. It's new and it isn't. It's mine and it belongs to the air. It is an answer to a question I didn't know how to ask." Sometimes, at night, when the foghorn blows and the houses pull their blankets up and we all pretend our telephone poles are trees, I turn the dial and there she is. "Good evening, Maple Harbor," she says. "This is Lila. I close my eyes, and I don't have to be brave anymore to listen. I just have to be as gentle as the sound. She tells a story about a boy who returned a trumpet because he thought it was too loud for his apartment. She has him bring it by the station, and together they figure out a place for loud to live. She laughs, and the laugh skips across the bay, twice, then disappears, and still, somehow, stays. I put my hand on the radio and feel the small thrum of it, our domestic heartbeat. I could tell you it's only electricity, metal and plastic and air, but that would be like saying a book is only paper. I know better. Words never scared me. The quiet did. I am less afraid now. There is a photo on my mantle of Rachel holding a cup of cocoa. Next to it, a new photo sits of Lila with a pair of headphones around her neck, and a grin like a storm that decided to be weather you could walk in. If you look fast, you could mix them up. If you looked the way a mother looks, you couldn't. You would see what I see. 2 lives that started close enough to share a comma. 2 maps that took different roads and came to the same town for pie. 2 names that fit in my mouth without apology. If you are listening and you think your own story has a stuck drawer, consider this an invitation. Pull. It will scrape. It might spill rubber bands and chalk and crumbs into your lap. You will laugh. You will not break the house. One July evening, near the anniversary of the first time I heard that laugh on my radio, I walked down to the diner and ordered a slice to go. Denise asked if I was taking it to Lila. I said yes. She put 2 forks in the bag and told me to bring her the plate back because she doesn't trust anyone to return her plates except me. I carried the warm pie box out into the blue twilight and thought about how a town is just a collection of people who keep handing each other small warm things and saying, "Here, this is for you. Come back when you're finished." I took the pie to the station, and in the studio we ate out of the tin with our forks, and the red light hummed, and our little voices moved with the gulls. Somewhere, a man washed dishes and stopped to listen. Somewhere, a nurse put on a cardigan. Somewhere, a girl under a blanket whispered into a walkie-talkie, "Is anyone there?" Somewhere, a woman at a kitchen table put her hand on a radio and said, "I am."